What if the challenge has nothing to do with the team and you're coaching your butt off at a team level and you're like, well, it's not changing anything? I think the next 10 years will be the era of excellent coaches. Will be doing well. I think businesses still need highly skilled coaches.
What actually motivated you to write your latest book? Is there any gaps that you were trying to close in the industry with your book?
I think so. I was fired up about mediocrity, basically, in agile coaching. My view was there's a lot of mediocre agile coaches. I don't think they were ill-intentioned. Part right now, the economics of agile coaching is getting disrupted. And I think
Mhm.
part of that is because of skill. And I think part of that disruption is value and the economy and the dilution of agile coaches. Oh, you want to get more done, so we're going to reduce your whip. Don't have that conversation, right? No. You want to squeeze more juice out of the lemon. Okay, that's what you want to do.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Weekly Ocean Podcast. Today's guest is Bob Gallen, agile coach and speaker and author and community builder. Welcome, Bob. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Vit. Thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to it. So I appreciate the invitation and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Sure. Thank you. So today I'd like to talk to you about agile coaching and leadership, and also about your book, your latest book, which is called Extraordinary Badass Agile Coach. Um, so before we jump in, maybe if you'd like to say a couple of words, what motivated you to become agile coach and been doing this for so long?
Sure. I wrote a blog not recently, not that long ago, and that's my answer to everything. So I do a lot of writing. But I reflected back on my direction, and my direction into coaching was not to. I didn't want to be a coach. I was trained in university as a software developer. I started out many years ago with developing software, and then I started leading teams. And I got promoted and I, acquired senior leadership roles. And in the mid 90s to the late 90s, I discovered Agile, Scrum, early Agile practices, Crystal. There was a bunch of early methodologies pre-Agile Manifesto in 2001. So I was a director then, or CTO director. So I was using Agile practices with my teams. And then along the way, I guess I was influencing. So as a leader of people in teams, I would coach their performance. And then I was coaching Agile. But I didn't think of it as a coach. I thought of it as a leadership. I thought of it as leadership. Uh,
Yeah.
and then somewhere maybe 10, 15 years ago, Agile coaching became a thing. And I sort of joined that bandwagon. So I came at it from the direction of software development, leadership, cross-product domain. I have a strong product management background, so a strong testing background, etc. So I came at it from that point of view. I think other people nowadays, they come at it from outside the domain. Some people are coming into agile coaching because it sounds good or it's a way of making money, etc. I'm not saying they're malicious, but they don't have the strong domain experience or the strong, practice experience that I had. So I think coaches are coming at it. A lot of them either have one direction or the other. And so my direction was more technical chops related.
Mhm.
And I just naturally started, using Agile and then influencing Agile, writing about it. I wrote a few books, not just the coaching. I wrote a product owner book. I wrote a book about Agile testing. So that was my passion. And that's how I entered the space. So maybe I'm the accidental Agile coach.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's about maybe half and half split when people coming from technical world and becoming coaches eventually. And sometimes it's opposite, people from the business side or like soft skill side, you should say,
Yeah.
come and they become coaches as well. So it's both sides. Yeah, there are a lot of psychology and humanity in this profession. So their soft skills needs to be there too. So
I mean, I
yeah.
think I'm opinionated. I think there's a better direction. So I think it's harder to come at it from the soft skills side of things because
Mm-hmm.
you have to learn a lot. You have to be humble and you have to realize that you have to build up what I think of as domain chops, either in product or technology or leadership. Um, or you naturally have them. So I think it's a little bit easier to become a coach if you have that strong domain foundation as opposed to coming in the different direction. But both directions can work, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about your book
Sure.
for the beginning. So, can you tell me what actually motivated you to write your latest book? Is there any gaps that you are trying to close in the industry with your book?
I think so. I mean, for me, writing is not natural for me, even though I do a lot of it and I like it. I need to be motivated. So I need to be fired up about something. So when I wrote the product owner book, I was fired up because there wasn't a lot of guidance. So the first edition of that book came out in 2009. And if you were
Mhm.
practicing Agile around 2007, 8, 9, the product owner role was very ill defined. And there was a lot of product owners that were struggling. So I was fired up about trying to provide guidance there. Fast
Okay.
forward to the EBAC book, the coaching book. I was fired up about mediocrity, basically, in agile coaching. My view was there's a lot of mediocre agile coaches. I don't think they were ill-intentioned, but I don't think there was a strong lineage towards professional coaching stance. So a lot of agile coaches had one stance that they were really leaning into, and there was a lot of mediocrity. And I wanted to sort of raise the bar. Maybe think of it as the professionalism of agile coaching, the craft of
Hmm.
agile coaching, and I wanted to do something about trying to raise the bar. Um, Now that being said, I don't know if the book has done that. So, but I think it's done that in pockets. But I think there's still this overarching, that's part right now. The economics of agile coaching is getting disrupted. And I think
Hmm.
part of that is because of skill. Uh, and I think part of that disruption is value and the economy and the dilution of agile coaches. I think there's a few excellent agile coaches, and there's a large majority still of sort of average or mediocre agile coaches. And I was trying to disrupt that.
Yeah, I see. I had conversation not long ago with one of the coaches, and he was saying that having agile coaches lately been a luxury for companies. So maybe it's because of some bad economy times and some other things that going on in the industries with disruptions of AI and things like that. It's been causing this. So I think having some guidance, such as your book, and having some techniques and steps how to elevate your skills, I think that's great. And I think that's where the word badass comes from. You have a little explanation in your book with a lot of synonyms and words that what it means. Uh,
Right.
and I think people should understand what it means. It really means like an exceptionally good person who's doing this job, right?
I,
So
I
it's
I think so. Or someone who's actually relentlessly trying to get better. So when I say
mhm.
mediocre coaching, I think many coaches are complacent. Like they'll attend a coaching class or a certification class, or they're a scrum master, and then they get the label that I'm a coach, and then they get complacent and they stop walking their talk. So badassery to me is like you said, to me part of it is that relentless pursuit of growth, of learning,
Hmm.
of curiosity and growth, and never getting complacent.
Yeah, yeah, a lifetime learning. That's great. That's what professions, many professions require. So
Yeah.
yeah, and also you introduced the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel, which is kind of like a guide or a framework for different skills and to double check with yourself, like a checklist basically, or verification of what you have and where you can elevate your skills. So anything you want to mention about that and how maybe coaches can use it to grow their skills?
Sure. I, I, I mean, when I was writing the book, so there's the predecessor to the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel was something Lisa Adkins and Michael Spade talked about called the Agile Coaching Competency Framework, or ACCF, or sometimes people call it the X-Wing model. And that was the predecessor model for what a well-rounded Agile coach is. And there were stances in there, or competencies. There was a bunch of them. Agile Lean. So your Agile Lean experience was a foundational experience. Servant leadership was a foundational experience. And then they talked about like 4 primary competencies of facilitating, professional coaching, teaching, and mentoring. And so you think of that as coach as that role. So I'm an Agile coach facilitating, or I'm an Agile coach mentoring. A Scrum Master does a lot of that. A Scrum Master would be facilitating. So I'm not stuck on the title coach. I think a Scrum Master, to me personally, is a coach. One of the things when I was writing the book, I wanted to anchor on something, but the ACCF is dated. It was introduced in 2010. And I've always felt that it missed a couple competencies. One was leadership, and the other was advising or consulting. In order to give the coach permission to provide advice. So if you meet a lot of Agile coaches nowadays, they think that providing advice is bad. And they look at that from the point of view of the professional coaching stance. Like professional coaching stance is asking questions so that the client solves their own problems. But what if the client can't, or whoever you're coaching can't? What if the team can't solve their own problems? Can you provide advice? So the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel surfaced. It's not mine. It surfaced from the community about 2017. 2016, 17, 18, it surfaced from some coaching retreats, and it added those competencies, and that really aligned with my view of Agile coaching. That it's and also I like the metaphor, the wheel, like becoming a well-rounded coach. So I like the physics of the wheel as well. So I anchored the book on that. I used it to talk about dancing in stances. An Agile coach being nimble and being able to, or should be skilled at navigating many stances depending on what the client needs from us, and adding those stances as well.
Yeah, I think this is a really good model because the coaches should be able to adapt to the situation and wear multiple hats, and either just asking questions or making advice or actually stepping up and doing a job a little bit, helping Scrum Master, helping Product Owner. They should be able to do this all, in my view. And I think that model covers that pretty well. So that's great. Another thing, you covered a lot of different coaching techniques in your book with some examples even. Can you please highlight maybe a couple that you find personally very useful in real life?
I think the wheel serves as a technique backdrop. So if you think of, for example, I would rather not talk about specific techniques. I would rather talk about developing your competencies. So facilitation, for example, you want to acquire skills there. You want to be able to facilitate meetings, decision making. You want to have tactics like liberating structures. So under the competency of facilitation, there's a lot of tactics, books, etc., that you can tackle. I don't want to list them all. I think it's important to say, if I'm in a role and facilitation is something I need to be able to do, I need to be able to grow in those areas. So facilitation. Leadership coaching. I think one of the effective tools there is empathy, for example, listening. Empathy for the leader, listening to the leader, adjusting your language. I think a lot of agile coaches we use agile, what I call agile gobbledygook. We use agile terminology and we expect everyone to understand that and resonate with that. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think we should be, talking in terms of the business, trying to ask our teams or leaders or organizations or product organizations, what problems are they trying to solve? And then bringing agile techniques to that without the overuse of language. So that would be
Mhm.
something else of becoming adept at coaching up or coaching leaders. So to me, that would be advising stance and learning how
Mhm.
to give advice. How do you give advice? One of the things I talked about in the book was storytelling. Bit
Yeah.
a bit, and what I mean by that is not becoming a storyteller, but but using it as a. I think coaches need to communicate incredibly effectively at a team level, at an organizational level, at a leadership level, and a lot of we talk about it being soft skills, which sort of is soft and squishy, but I would say part of that is really sharp communication ability, the ability to change your communication style based on your audience. If you're talking to a team versus talking to a senior leader like a CEO, you need to be able to adjust that. So practice. I think one of the things is keeping the wheel in the back of your mind and trying to become well-rounded. And then the idea is deciding where are you going to grow. I think it's a mistake to try to grow everywhere around the wheel. So look at your
Mhm.
job and say, what competencies do I need to grow to be excellent in my job? And then where am I? So use it as an assessment. And then whatever the gap is, then grow in those areas. And that would be classes and reading. But
Yeah.
I think another thing, though, is just practice. I don't know if that came through in the book, but I was trying to emphasize coaching is not a reading thing, it's a doing thing. And you have to practice having coaching conversations, like a lot.
Mhm.
So practice facilitation a lot. Find a mentor. So how do you become a good facilitator? Well, facilitate with someone who's stronger than you are and be humble enough to learn from them and watch them and then grow that way.
Yeah, and I guess that's where you mentioned that dojos that people can participate in those communities or meetups or whatever they are, and just practice because that's the best way to learn. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
Well,
then those.
you said
Mhm.
something critical, I think, earlier. You said it was situational. And so a lot of people want to have this script. Tell me how to coach. So a lot of those mediocre coaches, they want a checklist. Tell me how to
Yeah.
coach. And so how do I coach leaders? What's the checklist? And there's no checklist for every leader's different. You could have a really kind leader and you can have a leader who's grumpy and a leader who has time and a leader who has no time for you or doesn't respect you and anything in between. So you have to be very situational and very sense and respond and very nimble in your thinking. And a lot and how do you get that? How do you gain that? I think it's one of the keys is practice in different situations. So scenario based practice can help you to be able to think on your feet and to respond in those ways.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's and also that's where the stances come with the wheel, right? Because those they correlate with each other basically. And instead
Yeah,
of focusing on specific techniques, just figure out the roadmap of your own development, which stances you want to be expert in, and which ones is kind of like okay for you for right now, and grow from there. Okay,
absolutely.
yeah. Um, are there any like major pitfalls or mistakes that coaches usually, especially in the early days, that they make that maybe this wheel can help them stay away, or maybe just from your experience they should avoid?
I think one thing that we didn't mention is in the middle of the wheel is a hub called self mastery, and I think one of the problems when I was complaining about mediocre coaches, I see a lot of agile coaches who they tell people what to do, but they don't do it themselves as much. So they're coaching by telling, but they're not coaching by doing. And
Mhm.
self-mastery is the anchor of the wheel for all of the competencies, which says walk. I mean, there's things in there like continuous learning, walk your talk. To me, ethics are in there. There's a bunch of characteristics in there. Self-awareness is a part of self-mastery. Emotional intelligence, coaching presence, being present with your client, whoever you're coaching, are attributes of self-mastery. Assessing yourself on the wheel and then having a growth plan is part of that. And I think a lot of coaches, they look at coaching as an outward activity first, and they miss the fact that it's an inside-out job. I teach agile leadership, and I think it's the same thing for agile leaders. A lot of agile leaders, they lead outward, but they're not leading inward. They're not walking their talk, and
Yeah.
it's incredibly important for us to walk our talk as coaches and as leaders in agile context. So I'd say as a beginning coach, look inside, develop yourself. Uh, Another thing is I think folks are very impatient. They
Mm.
look at coaching as being this hierarchical thing. I need to get more money. They look at it Scrum Master, and every Scrum Master wants to be a coach. So it's a hierarchical. I'll get more money, right? I'll get more prestige, and that could be true. But I think it's be patient and realize that it's a learning journey. And I see so many that want to rush it. Uh, a third mistake, and I'll stop here, is I think team. This is probably applicable to Scrum Masters and team coaches. Uh, uh, everyone looks at it. A lot of those folks look at their job as coaching the team, and I would argue that the team is easy. It's easier to coach teams. And when you coach the team, you're assuming that every problem is under the control of the team. So I'm coaching the team to get better. Well, what if it's not a team problem? What if it's an organizational problem?
Yeah.
What if the challenge has nothing to do with the team and you're coaching your butt off at a team level and you're like, well, it's not changing anything. Well, you might want to scratch your head and say it's a system problem. It's an organizational problem. So I think a lot of coaches have to realize that to be unidirectional, to not be unidirectional, but to be 360.
Hmm.
You can coach the team, but sometimes you have to be adept at looking at the system and realize that it may be something else. I actually think if you've ever heard of Pareto, the Pareto principle, the 80-20
Hmm.
rule,
Yeah.
I actually think that probably 80% of what people think are team problems are actually systemic problems for the coach. So you have to be able to you have to be able to take your eyes off the team and put them elsewhere. So maybe those are three things that I think a lot of entry level coaches, they
Hmm.
make some fundamental mistakes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I kind of agree, especially with the last one, because there's a lot of what I would call baggage in each organization, and they're used to doing certain things in a certain way for a long time. Some leaders may be there for a while, and people kind of get used to it. It becomes like organizational culture.
Yep.
And when some coach comes in, especially external, and trying to make things change really quick
Yeah.
because they're on that short-term contract, it
Yep.
becomes really hard. And all you can do and trying your best is to push on the team because that's what you can kind of control. But it's
Yes.
harder to go upwards to the
Exactly.
leaders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, okay, yeah, that's great. Those good things to watch out for new coaches, and yeah, that's something to watch out for. So we touched upon technical versus non-technical coaches in the beginning. Do you have some advice to people who come in from non-technical world how to upgrade yourself to be more technical and be more have more knowledge in that area to help teams?
I want to generalize it and say I don't think I don't want to categorize it like there's technical coaches and non-technical coaches. I want to maybe differentiate it and say I think every agile coach should become more T-shaped, or nowadays people talk about pie shape. So, and what I mean by T-shaped is you should find an area, a vertical where you can make a difference, where you can connect organizationally and contribute value. And if you don't have that, remember we were talking about people coming from, like I came from development, so I immediately
Mm-hmm.
had T-shapedness, but people coming from the outside have to develop a T. So,
Mm-hmm.
so what are some of the T's, or what are some of the verticals? I would say technical skills would be one.
Mm-hmm.
What would that be? Architecture, development skills, QA skills, maybe expertise in software testing, DevOps. So having some technical chops. Not everything there, but that could be some vertical slices. What else? Product is another area where I think a coach could be very product centric. Uh, Decision making, value stream mapping, facilitating sessions, cross leadership sessions to decide what to work on. I would say organization would be another vertical. Organizational development. This is more enterprise, like leadership coaches or enterprise or organizational coaches, where you
Mm-hmm.
have some leadership chops, like I do. You have some organizational development chops. You might have some change management chops. You're familiar with how to change organizations. I think a coach that doesn't have something, I think of it as an anchor. You have to develop a vertical anchor. It's a value anchor, and then align your coaching with that. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think they find something that's valuable to the organization. The other thing is align it to your experience. Like, for example, my daughter shifted from social work into Scrum Mastery. Uh, and so she had 20 years plus of social work experience. So she has a lot of soft skills, conflict management, leadership, organizational development, but she doesn't have uh, software domain experience. I don't think she should probably try to learn how to program. I think that's probably too much of a leap. However, I think she needs an anchor. Now, product would be an area where she could anchor in product. And
Mm-hmm.
that would be a great place. And that's where she's trying to develop her vertical to make a difference in value. The other place she's anchoring is leadership, organizational leadership coaching, just because of her background. Even though it's not a Scrum Master role, she's trying to find value.
Yeah.
So that now a coach that doesn't have a vertical, I think I would warn them. So 10 years ago, I think you could get away with it not having a vertical. You could have Scrum speak and
Yeah.
you could talk about retros and stuff, and you could maybe fake it. Now I don't think it's fakeable. I think anyone who's a Scrum Master or a coach needs to find their verticals.
Yeah. More competitive now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about metrics? There also coach should be assessing the team or assessing the organization, figuring out with their help where to move, right, what to improve. Um, what are some of the maybe advice or best practices for figuring out metrics and how to track them and things like that?
See, I'm going to disappoint you that I'm not a big metrics guy. Um,
Okay.
I'm not. I didn't talk about metrics much in the book. I don't think, unless I was drinking. Maybe if I was having maybe if I was drinking, I talked about metrics. But I'm not a big metrics. I'm not anti-metrics, but there's so much dysfunction associated with metrics. It can create so much dysfunction organizationally. Leaders
Hmm.
can misuse them, that I try to be very light-handed with metrics. Now, I do think coaches should probably have a metric system that's only for them, so they don't share it upward at
Hmm.
all. And if they have to share it upward, I would say the coaches should, turn it off or something. But I think coaches need data, team performance data, to help guide their coaching. But they need to be very careful with it from an organization, from a misuse perspective. I, I I think there's this metrics dysfunction that can happen. There's a bunch of books that talk about like if you measure a system, the behavior of the system changes. So and people game the system, etc. So
Yeah.
now, one other point I want to make about metrics is I think there's metrics, and then there's arithmetic metrics, and then there's observational metrics. It's like JIRA metrics, and then there's perception-based metrics. And I think what do I can measure a team as a leader, and I can have a perception of the team's performance as a leader by watching what they do in sprint reviews. I hope I'm making sense. So
Yeah.
what is the data, and then what is the perception? There, a lot of people in Agile think that the data speaks for itself. That all leaders they do data-based decision making. You ever hear, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Leaders
Yeah.
want data. Leaders want value. You want to show incremental improvement with data. My
Yeah.
experience is exactly the opposite of that. Leaders don't. If leaders are deciding who to fire and who to keep, they don't fire up Jira and start, oh, Bob Galen, look at his velocity, right? We're going to keep Bob Galen and we're going to get rid of Vit, right? Oh yeah, Vit, look at his, he's down here and Bob's. They don't really do that. It's much more perception. It's sort of gut feeling. And so my metrics is don't get lost. My advice would be for coaches, don't get lost in the data. Also realize, and this is for the coach themselves, are you communicating via data, and are you also connecting to your stakeholders to tell them stories about your value, if that makes sense? And
Yeah.
are you doing both sides? A lot of coaches make the mistake and they're like, oh, the data speaks for itself. Or look at my team, look how good they're doing. Everyone should know that I'm producing value. And that's not true. That's not true. You have to speak for yourself. So I
Yeah.
think navigating the data carefully and making sure that you're balancing both sides of the proposition. Did,
Yeah.
did
No, that makes sense. Yeah, that's absolutely makes sense. The reason I'm asking this question is because I'm a data guy. I'm one of
exactly,
those.
exactly.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a technical background in decision support systems, and I always like setting up dashboards and measuring stuff. But I'm
Exactly.
not. Yeah, I'm not using it for like punishing people or showing my progress or whatever. But it just helps me to see one side of the
It's
work
it's
that we're
it's
doing.
beautiful. But I hate to tell you, Vit, I'm going to burst your bubble. Leaders, there's a secret that I'm going to share with you. Most leaders are not like you. I mean, they actually ask you for the dashboard, right? They ask you for the data and then they ignore it. So
Yeah,
they're not really, they appear to be data driven, but they're not as data driven as they appear. And
yeah,
so
that's true.
we just need to be feeding both sides is what's important, right?
Yeah, yeah, and those personal connections for sure, very important and make sense just to have conversation and explain to them what's going on honestly, right? If there are issues, just tell them there are issues and how you're solving them, and the data doesn't have to show that. And many
Well,
times actually we
go
are
ahead.
not there yet that the data will show us what will happen in the future. It never will. So so it only shows in the past, and
Exactly.
that's the biggest disadvantage of that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so coaches also have to interact with leaders. Are there any advice or best practices for coaches how to maybe influence their decision towards agility, or how to shift their mindset towards agility?
So yes, they have to interact with leaders. It's actually one of the things I do most of my job nowadays is less team coaching and it's more organizational leadership coaching. And part of the fun I have with leader coaching is how dynamic it is and how challenging it is sometimes. Uh, so the first thing I would say, I gave a hint already. Don't use agile language. If you're coaching leaders, figure out what matters to them, and don't translate it to agile language. Like, oh, you want to get more done, so we're going to reduce your whip. Don't have that conversation, right? No. You want to squeeze more juice out of the lemon. Okay, that's what you want to do, right? You want to get more juice, right? All right. Let me figure out how to meet that goal. Can we meet that goal with agile tactics? I think a lot of agilists make the mistake of we try to immediately translate their goals and outcomes to our language. We need to stay in their language, and then just use our techniques to do. So that's one key for leaders. I think another key for leaders is walking in their shoes. I've had agile coaches come into me. I'm a fairly good agilist, and I've hired coaches, and they come into me and they start telling me what to do. You need to do this and you need to do that, and they don't even ask me what my struggles are. And I smile to myself. I'm like, you have no clue what my day is like. You have no clue what pressure I'm under. You have shown zero empathy to me, and you're just telling me what I'm doing wrong, and you're telling me you need to convert to an agile mindset. Please, just stop. So what I would say is build empathy, walk in their shoes, figure out what keeps them up at night, build a relationship with them. Don't start coaching right away. Get to know them. One of the first things that I would say is if I'm going to coach you and you're a leader, I want to hear your story. So Vit, tell me your story. What got you into software? And I want to hear your story of how did you professionally make that decision? Tell me your story here at this company, Vit, right? What keeps you up at night? And then just listen to you. And I'm trying to create understanding and rapport. So often, agile coaches, we start immediately diving in and coaching. I would say don't do that particularly with leaders. With leaders, they're gonna want you to get out of the room. They're gonna be like, get out of here. You're not
Yeah.
helping me. The other thing is, I think you need to remember we were talking about verticals. You need to bring
Mhm.
some experience to play. You can't just bring agile, right? Tactics. You have to bring leadership chops, experience. You have to bring your experience to bear as options and things like that. So I think that's a key. Now, what I just said, I find so many agile coaches who try to coach leaders, they don't do what I said. They're making a lot of missteps there. Don't stay in professional coaching stance. If you know what I'm like, I think of professional coaching stance as asking questions.
Yeah.
I call it, sometimes a coach it's death by 1,000 questions. So anyone who's listening to this, who's coaching leaders, do not subject them to death by 1,000 questions. You can ask a few questions, but then once you understand their situation, you may need to go into leadership stance or advising stance or transformation stance and give them some options, working with them, co-create some solutions, get some skin in the game. Not just be a coach, but get some skin in the game. And so many coaches don't do that. So I think those are some keys to coaching leaders. Well, how does that resonate with you?
Well, I have a conspiracy theory about that.
Go ahead.
I think that most people, when they come to organization, they want to show some results right away. The next day, they want to show something that they've improved and they provided value because they
Sure.
got hired and things like that.
Yep.
And that's maybe why people come to leadership and trying to like, oh, if you start doing this, it will improve that and so forth. And they not really taking time up front, like you said, to learn them, to walk in their shoes, to adapt to the situation. So, like I had an example in my career a few years ago. I've been asked to cover for a Scrum Master who was leaving the team, and that was a pretty important product work that needed to be done, and he was leaving, so nobody was there. So when I went there, I told their product owners, there were two different teams with two product owners, and I told them, like, for the first months, I don't want to change anything. I just want to work with you, and you can tell me how you do things, and then we will kind of survey each other, and we will find improvements for the later. But first months, we're just going to be not changing anything at all. I'm just going to be a new guy running your meetings and things like that. And we did that, and after a while, we started making small changes. I did a lot of observations. I came to them pretty much every week with some improvements and things like that. And it went well. But like you said, many people don't follow this rule, and they just jump into the water, and that's it. And they scrap more things that they fix.
Something you said, I think, is critical as well, and it's my interpretation, but those people are making it about them, right? So I'm new and I want to make an impression.
Yeah.
I want to, and it's not that's I. That's a bad coaching mindset. It's not, I think an agile coach has to realize it's you and we. And that's the it's not about my solutions. It's not about my impact. Now it is about how quickly I partner, how quickly we work together, absolutely. But it's
Yeah.
it's really, to me, a key part of leadership is, are we co-creating? Are we partnering? I think it's a partner mindset. If you can get it, if you can get to that relationship, that's what you want with leaders.
Yeah, 100% agree on that. So another thing, coaches many times gain some insights into the confidential information and sensitive things in the organizations. Um, how to balance access to this type of information between confidentiality and transparency from the ethics standpoint?
What I would recommend, anyone who's listening to this, if you haven't done it, the Agile Alliance, if you go to the Agile Alliance website, they have a coaching initiative, an Agile coaching initiative, and they have an ethical statement. They have a very complete ethical statement with some scenarios for the different levels of ethics consideration. So they talk about ethics violations, what to do in these situations. So it helps interpret the ethics. I would require you all. So part of the cost of listening to this is to go to that site and read the ethics material at least once. And I think it's sound. It's been out there for over a year, maybe 2 years. It's built by coaches it's not, the Agile Alliance is pretty agnostic. So they're not trying to sell it. And I think it's very sound. And it'll give you some guidance about how to handle that. And so to me, it's an ethical dilemma. And Agile, it's not just coaches, leaders have ethical dilemmas. Coaches have ethical dilemmas, how to handle that stuff, how to handle ethical dilemmas like conflicts between Agile principles and business organizational ethics. I think you'll find some guidance there. So I would highly recommend everyone to go research that a little bit.
Okay, yeah, that's a great resource. I didn't know that. Okay, cool. That's good. So let's touch a little bit on the future. Do you see any agile coaching trends that will change the future of coaching anytime soon?
Well, I think we've lightly touched on. I think there's a disruption. So right now, it's not just economics. I think in terms of there's like 3 eras of agile coaching. So I think early, maybe like from 2000 to 2010, no one knew what an agile coach was. So that era was easy, the easy road. And it really, people didn't worry about being an agile coach so much. It wasn't necessarily a role or anything that people worried about. So there could have been technical coaching, but you were just a technical coach or a guide. Around
Hmm.
2010 to 2020, I think this was the golden era of coaching, where everyone is a coach. Everyone wants to be a coach. There's the joke that if you search on LinkedIn, you find 300,000 people with Agile Coach in their title, or 500,000. So there's hundreds of thousands of coaches in the world, uh, and this goes back to mediocrity. And I think what happened is early in that era, um, it was still easy because leaders didn't know what coaches did. So they sort of said, "Oh, okay, we'll pay for a coach. Oh, Scrum Masters. Oh, that sounds like a good idea. If we're doing Scrum, we need a Scrum Master." But there was no value sort of decision making. There was no justification, and there wasn't a lot of discrete ROI. Around 2020 to today, I think what's happening, lots of disruption, ROI matters, value matters, excellence matters. Excellence and
Hmm.
start. You can't get by just being a professional coach. You have to have multiple. You have to be able to navigate the wheel. You need deep competencies, and I think that's going to carry into the future. Unfortunately, I think a lot of coaches and scrum masters are going. So the ones who are mediocre or average are going to they're going to be displaced. There's the metaphor of wheat and chaff, right? I think I think the wheat. I think the next 10 years will be the era of excellent coaches will be doing well. I think businesses still need highly skilled coaches. I think businesses still can get value from highly skilled scrum masters. Unfortunately, maybe that's only 20% of the population. So
Hmm.
so it's going to be this sort of pivot, and a lot of people are going to have to figure out what to do with themselves. So I think that's the major future. Now, I don't know if you pay attention, but a lot of people are predicting the demise of coaching, the demise of Scrum Master, the demise of Agile. I'm not one of
Hmm.
those, but I do think it's changing. I do think there's a fundamental shift occurring, not just economic skill.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a bright, I think there's a bright sunrise on the horizon for, again, it goes back to badassery, extraordinarily badass coaches. I think there'll be a premium. I think organizations will love to hire those. I think it'll be incredibly competitive, and then we'll see what happens after that. Does
Yeah.
that resonate at all with you?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I also think maybe the part of the problem is also a large number of different organizations that certify anybody basically. Those certificates are so easy to get, and once you get it, you can claim your coach and you go hunt for job.
Exactly. So
So
one of my hopes, I can't predict it, but one of my hopes is the certifications come down as well. Meaning,
yeah.
do you realize we probably have 300? I'm not exact. You're a data guy. I am sure that we have 300 plus individual agile certifications in the market today. Can you imagine that? I mean,
Yeah.
if you were a customer, if you're a leader, how the heck do you differentiate 300 certifications and the value proposition? So my hope is that certification mill, some people call it the agile industrial complex where people are chasing money. I'm
Hmm.
hoping that declines. Uh,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's pretty resilient, but I hope that gets less and less important.
Yeah, I hope so too. I didn't believe much in certificates until, well, I still don't really believe in them. I don't think they have very little value in terms of education. But if for certain situations you have to get one and just to prove that you actually have to know something, but that becomes also a challenge. How do you separate people who know something versus who don't
E-
know anything? So
Exactly.
yeah, it's kind of hard, but yeah, we'll see how the future um, aligns with that. So, um, all right, sounds good. Yeah, we're coming to the end here. So, last, I want to just ask for any additional advice that we haven't talked about yet that you would like to share with agile coaches, maybe.
So maybe it's where to start. I get this question a lot. If you want to get into coaching, um, whatever the direction is, how to start. If you're new or if you're relatively new. I have a little list that I made, and so I would say read Lisa Atkins' book twice. It's cover to cover. No excuses, cover to cover, read it twice, read my book once. So Lisa's book is better than mine. Find a
This one,
exact.
right?
So read mine cover to cover. Thank you. Find a mentor, which isn't always easy, but find a mentor and be humble enough to be mentored, and find a coach and be humble enough to be coachable. Look at the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel and assess yourself. You can be inexperienced. Go figure out where are my skills. Um, I would say engage in the community. There are so many groups around, videos, interviews like this. Fully engage. Don't be lazy. Engage in the community. There's a lot of support. And then I would say practice your craft. It's not easy, so don't look for it. You have to practice and you want to look at it as a craft. So you're continuously practicing your craft. And the final thing we talked about is focus on self-mastery first. So don't just dive in on the outside coaching, also look inside. And those would be some early things to set a proper foundation. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, it was great having you. Wealth of information. And I
Hey,
hope we can
Vid.
talk more in the future.
Yeah, I had a good time. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for this
Yeah,
gift to the community, for doing this for other people. I appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you very much. We'll talk
You're
soon.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.